Hey, my name is Dr. Ben Glass. I'm a chiropractor. This is the Pre-Chiro podcast, just aiming to build context for any students out there considering the path to become a chiropractor. And today we have Dr. Riley Anderson from Dallas, Texas, went to Parker. Dr. Riley, thank you so much for taking some time to share your insights and your passions with anyone considering um, following down the rabbit hole one day. Can we get started by you sharing where you were before chiropractic school, what you were up to, and what attracted you to this path?
Yeah, of course. First of all, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yes.
Pre-chiropractic, I spent not quite a decade as a massage therapist. So body work has been the name of the game for a while now. So, serving in that with a passion was great, but it got to a point where I wanted to extend on what I could offer for what I serve. And I went back to school to get a degree, well, a focus in biology, health sciences, with the plan of going into something health related or something potentially in the medical field. And I thought at the time that the natural progression was into physical therapy. So I spent quite a bit of time serving in physical therapy. And while it's a noble profession, I think it's a beautiful thing when applied, when it's necessary. It's a beautiful thing. But for me personally, I wasn't quite finding what I was looking for in it. And at the moment, I wasn't quite sure what it was, but I just knew physical therapy wasn't it. So I found this thing called occupational therapy, which was at the time very interesting for me because it had that air of creativity. Like I've utilized physical therapy many times in my life for injuries, and I'm very thankful for it. But I wanted something where I could have this expression of myself translate into the work that I do in a way that's different than just the rehab that is very much necessary or seen in physical therapy. So discovering occupational therapy seemed like it provided that for me. And I thought, okay, this is cool. I can go to work each day and I can have this creative outlet to serve and to help the people that, that show up. So I worked really hard to get everything completed for occupational therapy school and PT. Decided at the last minute that I'm not going to apply for PT and it's OT. That's going to be my thing. I was, looking back half-heartedly, I was all in on occupational therapy. And I actually applied at OU Health Sciences. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the greatest things I can say with a pretty high degree of certainty that one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me was getting waitlisted for occupational therapy school. Mm-hmm. That was the summer of 2016. I had spent, 4.5, 5 years undergrad prepping for this point, right? This moment. And to be waitlisted was kind of, it was, disorienting. And I had a good friend of mine that I was speaking to on the phone about it. And he said, Riley, why haven't you thought about chiropractic? And it hit me like, it was so clear in that moment. I said, let me call you back. And I immediately started looking into chiropractic and the schools. Mm-hmm. I had received chiropractic before. Mm-hmm. It was a very mechanically based, like almost motion palpation type chiropractic, which is great. But it didn't grab me at that time to receive the care from, that it just didn't quite, it didn't grab me in the sense that I wasn't even considering it for years in a health focused undergrad program. I didn't even think about chiropractic. Mm-hmm. And once I Googled it, and I think one of the first things that come up was the major premise about this universal intelligence maintaining existence. And I'm just like, I feel like in that moment, I knew exactly what I was destined to do, what I was meant to do. Now, that journey, God, there's so much that is encumbered in that journey of finding yourself, finding who you are as a chiropractor. And, and for me, it was proximity that I went to Parker because I'm from Oklahoma City. I have had friends and family in the DFW for, most of my life. So let's go back to June 2016. I get my application in. The deadline's July 1st. I get it in on like the 20th or 30th. I get a call. I'm like, you're good to go. We'll get you started in January. So it's like, cool. That gave me a little bit of time to just kind of breathe and think about this new thing, or try to digest this new thing that I was going to take on. And then, I don't know, maybe a week or two later, I get another call. I was like, well, how would you like to start in September? I said, let's do it. I hadn't even seen the campus yet.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother and I don't know, a week or two later, drove down, saw the campus, and I was certain this is where I'm going to be for the next 3 years, 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
And that was mid-July. August rolls around. I get an apartment in Dallas, like, I don't know, September 2nd, 3rd, 4th, something like that, 2016. I was a chiropractic student. So the time between realizing that was my path and starting the journey into school was, it's a small window. We're talking like 60 days. So I'm really, really, I love this idea of what you're doing, this pre-chiro. I was looking around on your Instagram about this idea of giving students this better idea of what chiropractic is, so that they can kind of navigate towards that in a way that's a little bit more authentic towards them, instead of having to seek it out while in school, because that time is precious. As you know, that time is precious. And a lot of it is spent focusing on the academics, which is very important. But these are everything for what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much depth to study. There's
Yeah.
so many things that you can explore, and the sooner you can get through the basic exploration checkpoints of what is the philosophy and compass, where are the resources at, what are the books, what are the older teachers saying about chiropractic, and what are the newer teachers saying about chiropractic, and what do I resonate with, and
Yeah.
what is chiropractic? Can you demonstrate to me that you know what chiropractic is before you're going into this rigorous program and deciding to become a chiropractor?
Yeah.
It's that simple.
I think it's a
And
beautiful
like,
thing, because I even being a massage therapist, even having a biology background, I remember sitting there in first try, nudging one of my friends that I'd made. Hey, what's an atlas? And that's like, I'm already in school, and there's people, it takes them a while to discover what it is, their niche in chiropractic, because it's a very broad spectrum. And I think that's what I see the beauty of pre-chiro, is because we have this such broad spectrum that is chiropractic. Having a better footing or understanding going in and that could be potentially a game changer.
Potentially, I see it as the primary subluxation of the profession, that we're now recognizing the importance of having that clarity and connection between chiropractic and the incoming students, so that there's a clear understanding, clear intentions are being made from the beginning. And hearing you talk, I gotta say, you remind me of one of my friends from school, who you mentioned to me you've worked quite a bit with before we got on this podcast. I actually started together with John, and just fill in your vibes. It sounds to me like you've spent some time with him, and you've studied with some of the Numa seminars, but also the Tao of Chiropractic seminars.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's where you gravitated towards. How long did it take you to find them as a student, and also what were you up to before you found them, and how did your student experience change once you started working with them?
Yeah. It would have been late January 2018. So I was in 5th try. So I was closing in on halfway done when I met John and Eric.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, I'm the type of guy that I need to get in there and do it. I need to find 10,000 ways that didn't work before I figure it out. I tinker around. And so that's what I did for those first four and some change tries, was just, I know body work, where I was leaning on what I knew, but I spent a lot of time at seminars, motion palpation, a lot of very mechanically based things, which, looking back in hindsight, was necessary for me, because I really learned this, the joint complex and the tensegrity and how each system interacts and interplays and is connected to one another. But once I met John and Eric, they provided space for myself, the freedom to feel and to explore and to really trust this thing called innate. And it was super eye-opening. And again, I've met so many people through these different weekend long or week long, just the time we put in outside of school, that got that earlier. And it's really beautiful to see.
Mm.
But I think it's also important to know that we each have our own path.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, again, this pre-Chiro thing is so beautiful, because it helps. I think it can help find that path in a little more authentic way.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, I don't know. Either way, the point is, it took me almost halfway through school to find my my niche, where exactly I wanted to learn from, and then to have that in my field. And that's now where I push the profession. It's kind of been passed down. I work with students weekly, and I will continue to do that for the rest of my career, because it's a way to do just that, to nudge the profession within this giant spectrum, in the way that we would like to see it go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and knowing what Numa and Tao is about, it's really about returning to the roots of chiropractic and the teachings of Didi Palmer, and how that's evolved over time, through Sue Brown, through Arno Bernier, through Donnie Epstein, and through different teachers like Reggie Gold, who really were recognizing chiropractic outside of the context of healthcare, and really trying to push beyond some of the boundaries and some of the descriptive ways that it was being, as you described, kind of like mechanically developed to reach people's intellect and to reach people's educated mind, and to sort of gravitate away from the innate mind, and trusting what's going on within to be the guide.
Yeah.
So can you speak about kind of some of those pivotal experiences you had as a chiropractic student, some of the teachings that you've really latched onto and held tight as you've transitioned into practice, and yeah, just kind of elaborate on how your mindset has shifted as you've worked with them, and just also what chiropractic is to you.
Mm. The beautiful thing about is what comes visible. Excuse me. As a chiropractor, when you step to the table, or as a student or a pre-Chiro student, you step up to that person you're going to serve, and what you see is just so limited, and then we go through school and we start to learn, like, okay, that's the TVP, and we learn motion palpation, and we're expanding this lens through which we look. And I think being introduced to this idea of the Tao is it's opened my eyes to the subtleties that makes us human, and that is a part of our being, and how we can tap into that to serve someone. Like this idea of tone. I don't think I heard the word tone once in school from a professor. But that's what we do. That's everything that we do is tone. And ease. They afforded me this idea of what true ease is. And starting to see that and play with that in practice with the people that I serve has been such a beautiful thing, because I'm not really doing anything but following them at that point. So it became less about me. I mean, it almost became, that's the goal, is to make it less about you. That's what it means to be human, though, is you're going to perpetually combat that as a chiropractor. It's like, was that honoring or was that the ego? You know, every force application, I have like a sense of where that came from. So we're perpetually working on that, but that's it. It's like, how can you honor this person in a way that is going to evoke spirit and bring some form of awareness back to themselves? So that's kind of the whole goal, is let them guide, because really I'm doing nothing but holding space. That's the difference. Once I met John and Eric, my mind frame shifted from I'm doing something to you to I'm not really doing anything but just holding, providing, being space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's another question in there, but I don't remember what it was.
No, not necessarily. Do you think that there was anything from like a pragmatic standpoint? Is there anything that you could say would help a prospective student um, begin to observe within themselves how they hold space for others, or
Yeah.
how they can develop that mindset or that way of seeing things in the world?
Yeah, I think it's just to practice it, but then realize where you already do it. You do it with the people that you sit next to in a waiting room that you have a conversation with, or your mother when she's going through something, whatever it is. That's exactly what you're doing, is holding space. So start to realize and recognize where in your life you're doing that, and see what that feels, where you feel it in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And then start to translate that to the table.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big part of it, is really just doing it, and not having this, not being stuck in the thought that it has to look one certain way.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, what it feels like to you. That's when I work with students a lot. They ask for feedback and things, and it's never, I mean, I'll give them mechanical feedback just to, especially if we're at a very, depending on what level we're at, we might need some help with it. But I'm more interested in how they approach, how they feel, how the whole dance is done, what their connection is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really just my advice, is to start sitting with yourself, where in everyday life outside of chiropractic you hold space for others, but also yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and to notice what that feels like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely. I think that part of what attracts people to these other professions besides chiropractic is that there is this context that's built that, hey, you can go and gain experience in these clinical observation settings where you can go to a physical therapist's office and shadow them, or an occupational therapist shadow them. But it's rarely recommended that you go to a chiropractor and quote unquote observe, shadow what it is, what's going on. What can you see beyond what you can see, or what can you feel in that space? And I think that there's a different level of subtle um, features that are available to you when you step into a chiropractor's office that we need to build structure around so that they're able to witness what's the presence and connection that this person has to other people? What's the feeling that I get when I step into this space? Is it a really high energy, like type of space, or is it more of a low key, subtle energy, like a healing space that's very quiet? And yeah, there's very little structure that's available. And sometimes I think that people hear messages of like the importance of holding space and presence and matching the tone, and that we're working with tone, and there's not necessarily a lot of structure. And how do we navigate through that as a beginner and stay
Mm,
connected to that beginner mindset? So I'm really just trying to have this conversation with you for prospective students to help
yeah.
build these little granular like steps. And I know that when you get into frameworks, it limits sometimes the creativity, but at the same time, we need to start somewhere with people. And what I hear you saying is eventually it's not about the mechanical form, but it starts there. And then
Yeah.
eventually you can move beyond that. So,
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
From my perspective, the mechanics, it's rudimentary. Not in, I don't mean that in any other way than it's basic level, entry level stuff.
Mhm,
But it has to be there. Without that foundation, I don't know.
mhm,
It's an important foundation. And that's why I got this lens that we're viewing through, but we're perpetually expanding it.
mhm.
So yeah.
What would you say to your younger self when you were practicing massage? Let's just imagine you knew you wanted to become a chiropractor and that was your first choice. And you had already practiced massage for many years now, and you were looking to make that transition to becoming a chiropractor. How would you ease that transition or focus your energy better on the preparatory things that you needed to do to prime yourself for this experience that you've now gone through as
Mm, that's a good question. I think about that sometimes. Like, what doing massage would have been like with some of the understanding that I have? I did drastically to have the understanding of innate. But as far as transitioning into it, I again, I'm the type of person that gets in there and just does it. So for me, it's like, do more. I would have told myself to do more outside of school.
well?
Outside of school, the work on the hands-on relentlessly. Touch, touch, touch everyone that will let you.
Hmm.
And realize that even just laying hands is an adjustment. It doesn't have to be this big booming HVLA. We know that from, Donnie and the Power of Network. So yeah, I think just to be more obsessed, because I was obsessed, and I was even told once by somebody that I was obsessed, and that's all I think about and all I talk about. And I said, "You're goddamn right."
Hmm.
So I don't know. It's hard for me to really say anything other than just to pour yourself into it passionately, because that's what I do. That's what I did. And
Hmm.
I didn't have the head start. So if you've got a head start, find a mentor. Even if you're a pre-Chiro student and you're around the campus, find a mentor,
Hmm.
because they want to help. I promise. I promise this thing wants to be perpetuated. It's bigger than us. It's way bigger than us. It wants to be, it has to be, it needs to be perpetuated, and it will.
Hmm. Hmm. Most definitely. So you'll start working with students right when they get to Parker. Is that some of the opportunities that you provide? And
Oh
um,
yeah.
yeah,
As
and
as soon as as soon as they're ready, whatever level. I've now worked with students from pre, just before they start the program, up until they walk the stage next week, that type of thing. And
awesome.
I'll meet them where they're at, and we'll go from there. That's all there is to it. And I don't think of it any more complicated than that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there needs to be more of this concept of becoming an apprentice. Like
Hmm.
you're not
Hmm.
trying to be somebody else, but you need somebody to help guide you through some of the fundamental times, some of the
Yeah.
fundamental stages, and it's all about lineage. I mean, with anything, who you learn from really shapes the person that you become. Quite
Yeah.
often, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So. Yeah, so how would you describe the process that you bring people through when you're working with them as students, as pre-Chiro students? What are some things that just getting granular and getting really specific, like what are some things that you'll practice with others or that you'll share with others beyond what we've spoken about thus far?
Yeah. Usually, usually the sessions start off. I'll check somebody, because, as you know, watching puts so much into your field, and it brings up great questions. That's another reason I love to work with students, is asking me questions that I'm like, I have to, really dig sometimes to answer. I love that. But showing them what what's possible, you know, a demo, and then that kind of just sets the tone for the session. The field is kind of right, rich at that point.
Mhm.
And then I like to see where they're at. I ask them what's working, what's not working. How are you feeling? What are you afraid of? I want to know it all. And then with some of them, with most of them, I get a sense on how far to push them, and I challenge them.
Mhm.
And we have this very, it's usually somewhere between 4 to 10 students,
Mhm.
and we just hold we hold space for one another to fail.
Mhm.
We have, as I've learned from John, hot seats. You're gonna serve right there in front of everybody, with everybody giving you attention, but in this most beautiful, loving way. And it's just it's cool, because early on there's a lot stepwise. You're learning the tango, left foot here, right foot there, before you put it all together. And I love that just as much as I love opening somebody's awareness to a little bit more of the subtleties. Like
Mhm.
last Thursday, I asked a young man, I said, you could teach the class on motion palpation. That was fantastic. Everything you've described has been from a physical stance. Describe that with feeling. And it was this moment I saw, like, oh shit, I didn't know I could do that. So it was an epiphany, an aha moment. And that's where it's at. That's where the magic is for me,
Mhm.
is allowing them to discover it on their own.
Mhm.
So if they've had some time to be, they've been in school for a bit, so they've got a lot of condition on them, if you will. So the
Mhm.
unlearning process is just that, a process.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I as in the in whatever way I sense with each person, I titrate in there these little things. Some of them just absorb it immediately. Some of them it takes time. Some of them never will, and that's okay.
Mhm.
But I think it's about meeting them where they're at. I never tell them they're wrong. I've had DCs tell me, "Oh, your angle was off. This was off. That was off." I'm like, okay. So I never tell students that.
Mhm.
maybe their presence was off,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe there's something we can do a little bit different, or let's figure out or try it this way or that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to perpetuate what John and Eric did for me, which was trust in myself and innate. And that's been really the driving force of any session with any student or anybody else that I've practiced with since I met John and Eric.
Mm-hmm. And just to touch on what it's been like, life as a chiropractor practicing with this type of foundation, with these kinds of roots, can you describe how you work with people in practice? I'm sure it's very similar to how you just described you work with students, but could you just describe what it's like to be a chiropractor in practice? Um, Maybe describe some specifics about your practice, just to elicit some feeling in the viewers of what a practice could look like.
Yeah. First of all, chiropractic is, in my humble opinion, the greatest profession on the face of the planet. We take nothing from the earth. We're not depleting resources, and we're serving something way bigger than us. In my office, it's so that initial chiropractic office that I went into I was mid-20s, early to mid-20s, it was very sterile. It was very, just clean, and everything it felt, without being medical, it felt kind of medical. And the practice that I'm in now in Oak Cliff, Texas, Urban Hippie Chiropractic, with the other chiropractors that I work with, it's a family. It's a community. The first thing I do when I get there is I take my socks and shoes off. We have music playing. It's open bay adjusting style. And sometimes there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people on tables with 2 or 3 kids running around and maybe a dog. The is high in a very beautiful and loving way. And that's also another thing that I love is students that come down to observe, and they see what, like you said, what's possible in an office, and their minds are just blown because we're not school, professional. We have to be a whatever that particular professor or clinic doc's idea of professional is. It's hard for some not to absorb that. A lot of it's subconscious. So the unlearning that John and Eric talk about, I'm still doing it,
Mm-hmm.
13 months into practice.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's, I want to know about this person as much as they're, first of all, verbally willing to tell me in that initial sit down. And that's really all it is. We're just going to sit down. We're going to get to know each other. I want to know where they're at. I want to know their understanding of chiropractic. And all of it is great. That's exactly where they're at. And that's where I'm going to meet them. But really it's their system, that their bodies will tell me everything I need to know. So I get to this, I never ask somebody how they feel or how that feels. I want to know what they notice. That's my question for them, is what do you notice? Because it points the mirror back in. Oh, what do I notice? And at first it's always like, well, I don't hurt as much here, or I don't hurt as much there. And then over time it becomes, I slept better last night, or I have felt, in a happier mood for the past whatever long. It become emotional and mental and even spiritual, as opposed to just physical. And that's always the goal. That's always been the goal, is to reconnect somebody to their dynamic self. And the super consciousness that is Urban Hippie has created that. It's this entity now that is moving, that holds space for that type of person, for the person who is seeking to better understand, to become better aware, to have more expression of life. We do get pain as well, but I don't think that they know, like at the front of their mind that really what they want is this vitality that we provide. So my office looks just like that, like a fun, loving, high energy, vitalistic practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right on, yeah. And if anyone needs further understanding of vitalism, we recently did a podcast with a philosophy professor over at Life University who just published a paper on vitalism and chiropractic vitality, like what chiropractors mean when they call themselves vitalistic chiropractors. So we'll try and post a link to that little specific segment where it's being described what a vitalistic chiropractor is in the link below. But can you describe, just as we wrap up here, how you really feel about the future of, you're still young, you're just in practice, kind of fresh. What does the future hold for you? How do you peer out and look at yourself 5 years, 10 years, even just 5, 6 months from now? Are you still just as excited? Are you getting more excited about being a chiropractor and getting to share this with others? Like, what do you think about just kind of how you've arrived to who you are today and how that's going to continue to stay with you throughout
Yeah,
your life?
yeah. Chiropractic school is a little bit of a pressure cooker in a way. It's like we go in as this piece of coal with the potential to come out as a diamond. So it changed me in many ways. It helped me shed a lot of things that I thought were me that aren't. Yeah, moving forward, I see. Yeah, I do see myself being just as entranced with this thing at the end as I am now. Because I hold a memory, but I don't let it hold me. And what I mean by that is I step up to each session with each client, whether I've seen them one time or a million times, and it's new. I never think, oh, I did this Atlas adjustment last time that went this certain way. I know I can do that again. I can go back to that. It may be in the field, but that's not the way I hold the memory. It's like I know their system. I know where they're at. I know where they're, like this dynamic thing that they are, but I'm not using it as a guideline where to go back to. So with that being said, it's always different. It's always new. It's always just, I approach it with this childlike wonder and curiosity. So long as I maintain that, I feel, I don't know how I could ever get bored doing this. And then to serve somebody and realize it's not about you is more fulfilling than anything I've ever experienced in my life. So yeah, I see myself just continuing to expand my lens, just as those students should, providing as much space as I can for those who seek, for those who are willing to invest in themselves. And I'm very optimistic about the profession and where it's going, and people being awoken to all, our form of health, what we provide, the chiropractic lifestyle, and what else ties into that, especially with everything that went on this past year. I think we're at a time where we could really push this thing to the next level.
Well, I want to thank you so much for providing perspective that is super valuable. If I was a prospective student listening to this conversation, it would definitely be something that I probably never heard before in my college classrooms when they have different professions come to speak to me. It never gets this deep, and when I go to visit chiropractic schools as a prospective student, I'm not going to hear this depth in message and be shown this much insight. So that's what this is really all about. We're just going to continue to have meaningful conversations that are substantive and evoke a certain feeling in the person viewing. So Dr. Riley, keep doing your thing out there.
Yes,
Thank you
sir.
so much for connecting. And
Thank you.
yeah, if anyone wants to connect with you, I'll share your info below. I'm sure
Yeah.
it won't be an issue, and we'll
Yeah,
keep
please
shining
do.
this light, man.
Yeah. All right, my friend, you take care.
You too, brother. Thank you.